My name is Roger Duncan. I live in Yarmouth. I retired from the United States Navy in 2023 after a 23-year career in the reserves. I joined the Navy as a reservist, and over the period of that 23 years, served nearly 8 years in active duty between deployments and activations and school. I served overseas in not quite every continent, but most of them, and had some great adventures. It was certainly an honor to serve, and one of the things that is interesting to me in terms of service is that it felt like fun most of the time. So I grew up as a summer person in Maine, and my grandparents had a boat business, which was awesome. And my father was Vietnam era, but did not go to Vietnam. And we always had in our homes and in our world, we always had pictures of sailboats. And my dad loved the Constitution. He took me there a couple times as a boy, and there were engravings and cool stuff around the house of the USS Constitution. And I really couldn't envision participating in any other service. I really had no idea. However, when I went into the recruiter at age 30 or 29 and a half, and kind of thought, maybe I don't know if this is going to work or not. And I looked around. I did see pictures of the Constitution on the wall, and it made me feel like this was the right place. And I've always loved the USS Constitution. It's an amazing vessel. So I joined and the Navy had a position as a photographer. I was working, through my 20s, I was doing my best to be a photojournalist. And I'd gone to school for it, and I'd gone to graduate school for it, and I'd taken low-paying jobs for it, and I'd done free work, and I'd done all the stepping stones. And it was almost working. And my role as a photojournalist was to document the story of the day and to make it a good picture, and to make it a compelling kind of a combination of imagery and words, which my mother's father was a newspaper editor. My father's father was an English teacher and a sailboat guy in the summer. He had a party boat business that ran out of Booth Bay Harbor, Booth Bay area. And I went up there in the summers and enjoyed all the sailing. And so I had the skills of a photojournalist, and I had the background of an English writer and all the things. And the Navy had a job. They had a reservist position for me, and I was like, wait, you're going to give me a job doing photojournalism for the Navy? And I was like, that's awesome! So I jumped at it. And so the first few months were kind of dull. I went back and forth to the Reserve Center at Brunswick Naval Air Station at the time. And I was living in Portland and kind of trying to make my way in the world as a late 20-something with $20-some thousand of debt, and just trying to figure it out. And met a girl. She was pretty great. Turns out she grew up in Yarmouth. I didn't really realize we were going to be so close to Yarmouth at the time. But then 9/11 happened. And I joined in the summer of 2000 I joined in the fall of 2000 after the attack on USS Cole in the summer of 2000. I thought, here I am, 20-something. I've got pretty good skills. I'm in good shape. There's a guy named Bin something or other running around the world doing stuff that's unpleasant to Americans, like he's attacking American military vessels, and he bombed the Trade Center a couple of years ago. Even though it was a kind of a weak attempt at a bomb, he still bombed the damn Trade Center. And I thought, if this guy, if this world, if the United States gets attacked, I would vastly prefer to be on the team than not on it. Or have to scramble to be on it, or to get I could help. And so I joined the Navy as a photojournalist. I was a photographer's mate as an E3. I already had college, I already had some graduate school, I already had the better part of 10 years experience in the field. And I was like, look, I don't really know what an E3 is, so whatever. And they said, it's an advanced pay grade. I was like, sweet! I had no idea that I was basically the bottom of the barrel when I got there. I had no military family. The closest family I had that was in the military was my father's first cousin, Scott, who'd done some Coast Guard time, and then his father, who'd been part of the invasion of Normandy and had traveled through France as a junior-most man in the Army in World War II. So he, essentially, I had no idea what I was getting into, but I knew I wanted to help. And that's kind of been a theme for my life. No idea what you're getting into, but you want to help. So my world of being in the military kind of I went from being a happy-go-lucky photographer and tour guide with, 20-something of, like, I had a girlfriend and she was pretty awesome and, like, this might go somewhere, I don't know. And then within a week of the attacks on September 11th, I was a nighttime gate guard in a time of war. I was like, sweet. And I was working, 6 days on, 10 to 12 hours a day, and then we'd do it all again. And so for the first year of that, I was activated for a full year. They called me the Fan, P-H-A-N. My rate was P-H, and then the airman was A-N. So they called me the Fan. I was like, that's awesome. I really was clueless and wasn't a liability, but without that first year of active duty, I really would definitely have washed out of the military. There would have been no way I had enough background or skill to be a part of the U.S. military organization that I ended up being pretty successful in, all said and done. I retired as a Chief Petty Officer in 2023 after having served 13 years as a Chief Petty Officer, which is fundamentally middle management, leading troops into dangerous situations and or trying to meet missions that you may or may not know anything about. So as a reservist, you're usually only called into active duty when something is actually on fire, and they haven't quite been able to solve it with the regular active duty. The regular active duty, don't get me wrong, they're consistently good, but they're the first stringers. And if the first stringers are having trouble meeting the job, they call the backups. And 3 times out of 4, the backups aren't as good as the first stringers, but they're desperate and they say, "Oh my God, we gotta have." And then you arrive on location and you're like, "Hi, I'm here to help." And they're like, "Oh my God, we're so glad you're here. You need to be the best ever." And it takes you time to learn, and it takes you time to meet people, and it takes you time to train up, and then you have to apply the stuff that you had from somewhere else that doesn't really apply, and then you have to be the person they want you to be, and then they kick you out because they didn't really have the money for you to come in the first place, which is awesome. And it leaves kind of a mark here. You're like, wait, I thought I was needed. I thought I was helpful. I thought I was going to be good at this. And you are good at it. It's just that you're not what they really need. Like, at least for me. And I think again and again that happened to me, where I would say, and moreover, I was trying to make this whole photography career happen. So I was making myself available to do this. And it was, again, almost working. But then I'd get called away for 2 weeks or 6 weeks or 10 weeks or 2 months or a year to do these other awesome jobs. And the other awesome jobs would then cut into the effectiveness and the momentum of the photography. So I wasn't actually going in front of live bullets ever. I did go to Afghanistan. I did serve in Kabul in a time of war. It was dangerous and scary and difficult, but I never got shot at. There were some moments where we were like, let's not get shot at here. And we didn't get shot at. It was great. But those are the moments that make you go, okay, I'm glad I'm not getting shot at. Because there are definitely guys who were in Afghanistan and Iraq and all over the world getting shot at regularly. And we were like, I was supporting media by being a driver, and I wore armor every day, and I carried a weapon, and I did all the things. I learned how to shoot all the big things, and it was super cool to learn to shoot the things. But I was super glad that I never had to return fire. And, call me what you will, call me what, a bus rider, but, the name of the game is, I feel like I was properly trained to be in an environment that was dangerous. And had things gone wrong, I would happily have stepped up. I would not have happily given my life, but I was ready to do the things that were needed to do to support the mission and the people around me and the country, and the fundamentally the part of the puzzle that you don't really get when you join, maybe, is that, at least I didn't get, is that, and I love this phrase, it's when you join the military, you are signing a blank check for everything, to include your life, to the government for the period of time that you are in service. And you don't really know what you're signing. Like, a blank check is, you don't know what you're signing it for. But you know that it's a commitment to doing something that might be really hard. And what I did was hard. I balanced a civilian career with a military career with a family for over 20 years. My wife and I were married in 2003. Martina, she grew up on Pleasant Street here in Yarmouth. And she is a hard-charging professional with real skills and real motivation and real ambition. And I wasn't all of those things. I was a creative professional who was trying to make it in a competitive field with not enough money and not enough time and not enough this and not enough that. And I ended up doing a lot of child raising. I ended up doing a lot of odd vehicle management and house repair and photography that was for almost no money. And then I'd go off for 2 weeks or 6 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever. And I'd come back and then I'd be like, okay, I'm ready to be a photographer again. And I knew nobody. And I knew not enough about the community and not enough about the world that I was living. We lived in Bath for the first 10 years of our marriage. And then we moved to Yarmouth right around just shortly after the time our second child was born, Ava. Our first child, Jay, is now 16 and is a junior at Yarmouth High School. Ava is in the 5th grade and 10. So note the age difference. Thanks to your U.S. military, our children are far apart in age. After finishing up my activation at Brunswick Naval Air Station, I bounced through a small command at Naval Air Station as a reservist. And then there was a reorganization of all the photographers' mates, and we were asked to sort of line up our preferences. And I figured, combat camera, sounds like a good shop. I've never heard of it, but I'll put my name in. I'll put that one first. Boom, I'm grabbed by the ComCam guys. Combat camera was, at the time, a support to the Special Forces that provided combat documentation skill to the operational arm of the Pentagon, which meant that a ComCam operator would get into a stack and breach doors and do all the things alongside Special Forces operators as they were doing all the things. Because the idea was that while in the middle of bullets flying combat, that people don't see things the same way that they do when they're not in combat. It's a tunnel vision. It's like you see what you're shooting at and you see what you're supposed to see, but you don't maybe see the full picture because there's a lot going on, and it's fast and it's furious and it's a violence of action. So having a documentary photographer along there who can shoot video under fire and carry all the things that was the point. It was before the age of drones, before the age of body cams, before the age of the kind of, I don't really want to call it invasive, but like live footage can be captured from a very small device now that it could not be done in the early 2000s, or at least effectively in a war place. And now, combat camera was disestablished in large part because of that technology. At the time, I had skills in still photography. I was available. I was strong and fit. I could do all that, and they said, "You're hired." And I also had time because I wasn't employed functionally. I was waiting for the next photography gig to come along. I mean, I spent a really long time photographing pretty things and then going door to door trying to sell cards. I was working as a photo assistant on a day rate, lugging all these heavy things in and out of buildings for commercial photographers. I was working for the Forecaster and the Casco Bay Weekly at $20 an assignment. Those assignments would come and go with no warning. I was trying to get a position at the Portland Press Herald, but they were union, and you couldn't get into the shop unless you were union, and you couldn't get into the union unless you were part of the shop. So I was like, oh, sweet. I'd been an AP photographer, but there was one AP photographer who, by the way, it's the same guy now as it was in 1999. Same one guy. So not a lot of turnover in that job. By the way, he's a great photographer, don't get me wrong. Very good photographer. I've met him a couple times. He's a very pleasant fellow, just not going to give up his job until he dies. Which is good for him. The rest of us who wanted to be photographers, not going to get work. So my world, at the time I was entering into combat camera, was available. And I was fit and strong, and I thought it was cool. And I wanted to learn how to fire guns and do all the things that these cool guys did. And I thrived there. I really did. I was really good as a position of a junior enlisted sailor with skills and camera gear that I knew how to work. And I also could lug all that heavy stuff. I played football and ice hockey and lacrosse as a boy, and then switched to rowing in college. And I was fit and strong. I was the captain of that team. And when I got to combat camera, I could keep up with all those guys. Even they were 5, 8, 10 years younger than me. I was 34, 5'6" when I was really in my peak there. And these young bucks were 20, maybe 2. And I was running with them. And there are a couple who were faster than me, but not many of them. In the reserves, oh my God, I was always the fastest until I got old, which is cool. Not to break my arm patting myself on the back, but the point was, I was first off the bench at a high school level, and I was first off the bench as a young adult, and I call 34, 35 a young adult now because I'm in my 50s. But, I was building professional skill set that really came good. I was deployed to Djibouti and patrolled with the Marines around that base. There wasn't, at the time, any major military activity there. It was an expeditionary camp that was getting turned into a base by the Navy. And now, oh my God, it's a multi-million-dollar facility that runs massive operations through it on a regular basis. I went back there in 2021 as a public affairs officer, which is a totally different role from a combat camera photographer. Combat camera photographer is fast and loose. It's handle dirty things. It's work with people who are rough and tumble. It's bounce through things and document the pictures as the story of the day and deliver them and don't think about it. And as a public affairs officer, which is what I sort of was promoted to, your job is to think about it. Your job is to be part of the strategy making of what are we doing and why. And I went to the schools, I learned how to do it, but I was never very good at it because I loved the photography. I loved making pictures. I loved the imagery and the storytelling and the being part of the action out there with the teams. And I never went out with the teams. I never was tapped for that. I patrolled with regular rank and file Marines. I went a part of flight crews. I did everything except submarines. Helicopter, a lot of this scary sticking your head out the window stuff. I got to fly over New York Harbor when there were ships coming in, and I documented the arrival of USS New York with the Statue of Liberty in the background. It was so cool. That was one of my last jobs. I did some neat stuff. There was tons of neat stuff that happened. And I also led some troops who were pretty great over the years. I in Afghanistan, led a team of 3, started out 4, and then one of them had to go home, and it was kind of a bouncing road. But, one of the things I got good at as a big brother and as an older chief petty officer, I was selected for chief petty officer with 10 years of my career, but I was 40, which meant that I was as old as a lot of guys were when they were retiring. And I had small children, and I had a career. I'd really tried. I knew a lot of different, things about my field. So when I was selected for chief petty officer, I already had a lot in my bag of tricks, which I think ultimately, chief petty officer is middle management, and it's taking care of young adults. And something I love to do is taking care of young adults. It's hard work because your 20s, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's a really difficult time. I think, to my view, it's difficult. It's more difficult than being in your teens or in your 30s because there's ambition, there's a lack of finances, there's a sense of purpose and duty, there's an idealism, there's you think that the world is yet to open up for you, and then you can do anything. And there's some bad decisions. And then there's also the uncertainty of relationships, which I think is an ass-kicking. That whole world of not having a partner is super difficult. And not having the stability of being able to come home and be like, it's going to be okay, honey. It's going to be okay, honey. And then, because you're on your own. So my heart goes out to 20-somethings because they're doing it. And at the same time, they've got such huge power. If they would just focus it and put it in the right direction, oh my God, like the 20-somethings would rule the world. But that's not going to happen because they're. So as a 50-something, I take special effort into looking out for 20-somethings because I get it. It sucks. So right now in my life, I'm an arborist. I worked like a bandit to be the great photographer, and I did that in the military. And as I got going, after Afghanistan, I came back from Afghanistan in 2013. I had one kid, and then right after Afghanistan, Ava was born. Yes, thank you again for U.S. military. Cancel, plan and cancel, plan and cancel. Deployment, plan, cancel. Martina says, we're not having a baby while you're deployed. I'm not doing it. I was like, okay. So our children are 6, almost 7 years apart because I had 3 deployments planned and canceled, and then I had some cockeyed medical thing that really wasn't a medical thing that took 2 years to clear up. It's bizarre. That's a totally different story, but we're not gonna talk about that just right. The part of my career that I guess I look at my military career as a sort of a growing up, because I went from being a 20-something to being a 50-something and did so many different things that were age appropriate, and I had to learn my way around as I was doing it because I was a reservist and I'd show up when something was actually on fire. It wasn't actually on fire. It was just like some grand high-pressure gig that I'd show up to that everybody said you had to be awesome at when you arrived. And I was like, I'm awesome! And then I'd get there and they'd be like, yeah, you're not as awesome as we thought. Yeah, you can go home now. And I was like, what? And then I thought I was still awesome, but then it was kind of that had a whole hit on confidence again and again and again. But undaunted, here I go. I'm ready to help. So now, as a Yarmouth resident, a small businessman, parent, spouse, owner of dogs, and a small boat, I bring a lot which doesn't, I suppose it's like anybody, right? Like, we all have like this public thing that we do, and we all have our like business card, elevator speech. But we all have a whole lot underneath the surface. And as a chief petty officer, I got into that with my troops. I got into, like, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? What's going to work for them? And as a reservist, like, I have to, as a middle manager in the reserves, I had to balance my own professional, but I also had to look at 10 different sailors. And I had to assess them for their relative skill, their availability, their willingness, their long-term commitment. Do I send them to school? Do I deploy them? Do I train them myself? Do I do absolutely nothing? Do I tell them, do your thing, go have a baby, do your whatever it is, and then don't ask questions about the things that I'm really not authorized to know about? But if I don't ask questions about it, like how does that affect the mission when they get mobilized? Like one of my first questions for my sailors was, in the event that you get mobilized, like I was after 9/11, in the event that another 9/11 happens, how's that going to affect you? What's going to go down? And I want you to visualize that in your head, because it's no joke. Like, we are in between 2001 and the pullout from Afghanistan, we were in a time of war. And there was a lot going on, and there were a lot of needs that reservists filled, even if they weren't the first choice of the active duty. The reservists were there, showing up, having had breakfast, arrived on time, do your part. And, you know, there's a lot to be said for that. As a chief petty officer in the reserves, I had to deal with the variety of personal, professional, family, and I looked at it like a three-legged stool. You got leg of family, leg of professional, and leg of personal and military. So there's military, personal, and your professional life. And if any one of those legs gets a little too long or a little too short, the stool tips over. And so you have to give the minimum in the military, and you have to give, if your professional life says, oh my God, I need you this 5 weeks. Okay, all right, I'm your chief. I won't force you to come to that annual training in those 5 weeks, but you got to come sometime this year. And you got to come for no less than 2 weeks. And if you want to break that 2 weeks up into 3 little bites and use your AT that way, that's awesome. Do it. I was a parent of small children. I was working in a role that was low-paying and competitive, and I was a middle manager in an organization that needed people in a time of war. And they needed competent people, and they needed people who were ready. So I wasn't just managing my own three-legged stool. I was managing 10 troops, all of whom had their own three-legged stool. And that was a lot. And I did it my career was 23 years long, but as a chief, I led as a chief for 13 years. And which was kind of unprecedented. Most people aren't selected for chief until 14, 15, 16 years, and most people retire at 20, but there's a lot of reasons for that. So as a Yarmouth resident, I feel like there's a lot of parts of everybody's life that we see, like the business card, the elevator speech, the ability to drive down the street in a truck that has your name on it, right? But there's a lot of things that go into that you don't see, and I get that. After having been a chief, leading troops all over the country for 13 years as a leader, I get that. Like, everybody's got their own problems and their own bag of tricks and their own stuff, right? So we as leaders, and I think as citizens, need to remember that it's not just an elevator speech that drives a person's world. And, when we're thinking about, all the stuff, right? And then this world today that we live in is complicated and intense and fast-paced and short-fused, and we try to be kind to each other, and at the same time, if we don't get our own job done and don't get our own thing finished, don't finish the, project that keeps the rain and the cold out, and don't finish the project that keeps us employed, things go bad fast. And there isn't a lot of room for error when things go bad fast. So I love the idea of being kind to people. I love the idea of watching out for everybody and being everybody's good buddy, and this whole, world of taking care of people because it's the right thing to do. But you know what? They got to take care of themselves, and they got to step up and show up on time, haven't had breakfast, be ready to rock and roll. If you need equipment, you get it. You acquire it. You find a way to get it. You do it. And if you need my help, you ask for what you need, but you don't look for handouts and don't look for freebies. And so, there's a lot of challenge in our world, and I think veterans are great people. Veterans are people who have the ability to step into things that they may or may not know what they're getting into and adapt and overcome and to meet expectations, but figure out what expectations are on the fly. Like I said, you show up called for something that you think you get the elevator speech for, but then you get there and you realize, oh, okay, I get it now. I'm in Guam. And when they ask me, how long have you been here? I say, I arrived last week. And what they really meant was, did your grandparents start here? Our community here in Yarmouth is a little different that way because I think a lot of people come here out of nowhere. I mean, they call us northern Massachusetts. And in some ways, I think they're right. But that's not all bad. I mean, we are where we are, and we choose to be here. So don't get too chippy about it. I would recommend every young adult seriously consider being a military member, a first responder of some kind, fire, police, EMT, a teacher, a lawyer, one of these jobs that requires massive commitment that you may or may not know what you're getting into. At no point in your life will anyone say to you, oh my God, you were in the military? How dumb was that? You must be a crazy person. No. Wait, you were a teacher? No, they will never say that. And even if you are the world's worst teacher, even if you are the world's worst military member, even if you fail out and decide that you are a conscientious objector after 20 minutes, you're still, and you stick out your first deployment. The commitment and the ability to say, I can step into doing something and then realize, okay, that one wasn't for me. And then you move on and you go on to the next thing in your life. That first job, that first experience of being in the military, of being one of those jobs that serves other people. And yes, I consider a lawyer as someone who serves other people. Even though it's high paying, at a junior level, you are doing shit that is hard and weird and long hours, and it's difficult. And many people I know have taken the bar and have done it and have decided they hated it and moved on. I got no worries about that. If they decided to start a marijuana farm, I'd be like, wow, you're cute. You decided to go and, do something that was not going to serve other people, like being a photojournalist. I'd be like, cute. That almost works, doesn't it? But, I think the takeaway I want to share with my neighbors and friends and people here in Yarmouth is that I had a good experience in the military. It was hard. It was no joke. There was a lot of times when I did stuff that was difficult for me, and my family picked up the slack. And my family carried the ball here at home again and again and again when I was out. It wasn't about me. It was about, in order for my career to have thrived, I had to have a solid family. And my wife and my kids and my community, the guys who live around me, all stepped up again and again and again to support my career. Could not have done it without them. My retirement ceremony that I had a little bit more than a year ago, the fundamental message was thank you. The fundamental message, people are saying thank you for your service. Well, guess what? I couldn't have done it without all the other people in my life. There was just no way. It takes an enormous toll on your energy level and your employer, and your employer has to flex to meet your frickin' crazy reserve schedule. It's untenable in most cases. my neighbors and my friends and this community stepped up to help me again and again. And my family was tireless, specifically my wife, tireless. So I could not have had a successful military career as a reservist, and I would venture to guess also as an active duty, without a solid family. And so thank you to all of you for that. It just wasn't going to happen without you guys. So all the stories, all the adventures, all the bouncing around the world, all the service to the various difficult jobs, it doesn't happen without people in the community who realize and go, okay, I'll make your family a casserole. It'll just show up. Or someone just shows up and shovels the driveway. Or someone just appears out of nowhere and says, I got that. Oh, wait. Yeah. Does your kid need a ride to school? Yeah. You're in the... I got that. Not a lot of hoo-ha, not a lot of looking for a thank you note, not a lot of pay, but it just gets done. And like, whether it's Yarmouth or whether it's Maine or whether it's the United States, I think that a lot of people do that kind of thing. And that's sort of the undercarriage of what keeps us together. So I intend to. I do give back a lot. I support the various community organizations that I'm part of. I want my business to thrive, but I also want my town around me to thrive. I want my community and my state to thrive. I want my country to thrive, and I'm sad sometimes that it's not. But I get to a point I'm like, I don't know how much more I can do. So I hope that those of you who are looking at this kind of feel like there's something that you can do to support either a veteran or a person who's out there making that kind of commitment, making that kind of help. Remember that the families at home are doing as much as the person who's downrange, and sometimes more. When I was downrange, I had one job. When I was home, I had 2 or 3 or 4 that were all competing for my time. I had a 3-legged stool when I was at home. I had just one job. I'm downrange. Got to support this. Home, 3-legged stool. And I got to coordinate different people who are trying to come and go with their own 3-legged stools. Holy buckets. I would welcome interaction with other local veterans, especially if you're struggling. I would love to employ local veterans in my small business. I have high expectations, though. I am a chief petty officer, and I expect you to operate like you're responding to a chief petty officer. And if you can't, that's okay. But I'm not going to be offering you a job if you're not ready to rock and roll. A quiet professional is someone who is very good at what they do, but they don't necessarily talk about it very much. And the part of my job in the military was talking about it and being the guy that stood in front of the camera and talked about it, to let other quiet professionals not talk about it. And as a public affairs officer, my job was to beat the drum and talk about it. Because so many veterans were so good at what they did and just didn't want the extra work of talking about it. There's a lot of things about the way you're raised in the military community that mean that you're not going to get recognized for every darn tootin' thing you do. But those things might be important, and those things contribute to a larger community and a larger safety net that we all love to participate in and soak up. More than once, I've said to people when they're bitching about taxes and one thing and another, it could be Djibouti. If you want to live in a world in which taxes and things don't happen, go to Djibouti, dude. See how it is, because it's not good. if you don't like workman's comp insurance, go to Djibouti. See how that works out for you. So I do love working around veterans. I feel safer and more confident when I've got a veteran on my team, because I think that kind of training is valuable to my business, and also I think to the larger community. And I think sometimes veterans don't necessarily have the same frame of thinking in terms of profit that a lot of the rest of the world does. I think that we are more team-oriented in a lot of ways. I also love hiring athletes who've been on a competitive team, like a lacrosse or a hockey or a football or a field hockey or a basketball or any of the team sports that force you to rely on others. Love that. Love those people. If you thought for 1 second that athletics weren't valuable in the big world, you are wrong. It teaches people team skills. Team skills help communities. Communities help everybody. So you teach that in a young age with athletics in a way that's very effective. So, this idea that academics are more important than athletics, below that. There's lots of people who need athletics more than they need academics. You want to inspire somebody, but play to their strengths. If someone's a good reader, great. If someone can, run 100 meters, maybe that's where they need to apply their strengths. And then learn to be a leader in that environment. My business is Roger Duncan Tree Services. Right now I drive a beat-up old Ford truck, and I'm this close to having the awesome 4700 maroon vehicle. So you'll see a new sticker on my Duncan Tree Services truck. It'll be a new truck with the same old sticker. I'm an arborist. I cut trees for a living. I do pruning and removal. I got started in my business through brown-tail moth removal. I'm very passionate about not using chemicals to remove brown-tail moth from our environment. It's dangerous and painful and no fun, and it can be stopped. It can be slowed down. It can be diminished. All you got to do is cut the little stinkers out of the trees in the winter. Oh my God, how easy is that? I have a 72-foot lift. I go up in the air. I do dangerous things and scary things, which I learned how to do in the military. And now I just do it here in town. I do it for money, and I do it to support my family. And I do it because people who want to hire me to do it realize that it's going to make their lives better. And I bring the same kind of commitment that I brought to the military to my job as an arborist, because I'm the same dude. It's the same me, and it's the same family that's behind me. And I'm trying to support now the community of Yarmouth and the community of Greater Portland and Maine in general with the same kind of energy that I brought to the military. I try to be good at this job, but gosh, you know what? I've been doing it 5 years, and I'm learning every day. And some days are good, and some days not so good. And we all have those days. So I want you to know that I give my best every day at what I do, and that means working through the rain. That means if it's not raining, it's not training. That's a line, right, from military lifestyle. So I've got all the rain gear. I've got all the snow gear. I work, to make it good for my clients and to have so that they don't have a bad day with their trees. And it's dangerous. And it's expensive, and it's not easy. So I know that you guys are dealing with the same kinds of things in your worlds that mean that your worry is that big old tree is going to come down on your house in a storm. It might. If you do nothing, it might. And my job is to bring it down and not hit your house on a day when it's not raining and snowing and horrible. If it's raining and snowing and horrible and it happens, call me. I've got a lift, I've got skills, I can make it help. I can improve things that are going badly. Again, Roger Duncan, Yarmouth, Maine. I'm an arborist. I'm a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer. And I look forward to working with you here in town or hiring you here in town and or volunteering alongside you here in town. Thanks very much.